What is up, guys? Welcome back to Fit Body Secrets, where my mission is to bring you guys inspiration, motivation, and a ton of tips to help you guys on your fitness journey. And bear with me today. I have been helping out an athlete with quarterfinals this weekend, but I am also dealing with a cold. And I get sick maybe once every 2 years with any kind of cold sinusy thing. And I just have a little bit of a hoarse voice and a little bit of a cough, and it's been driving me crazy this weekend and affecting my sleep, but not going to let it steal my cadence on my podcast. And today's episode is a Fit Body short, so it's going to be a little bit shorter episode, a little nugget to hopefully help you guys out, which is making one little change in your life. And today's episode, I want to talk to you guys about food tracking burnout. So if you've been somebody that is consistent with tracking macros or even just keeping a food journal and you feel like maybe you hit this wall at whatever point in your journey and you're like, man, I got burned out and I stopped doing it. Or you find that this happens, you might get a cadence going and then all of a sudden you're burned out and you don't even want to log into the app, or it's the weekend, you're like, I don't want to see that. And you tell yourself, I'm just burned out. And maybe you've gotten results, you've actually seen progress with doing this habit. Or maybe you haven't seen results with this habit. I want to go over a couple of things today to hopefully help you guys out. So number one, before we go into burnout, let's talk about why we track. Okay, so when we are thinking about tracking our food, the purpose of tracking your food isn't just to track a food and keep a food diary without really any goal, right? Because that'd be kind of stupid. The goal is to look at the food tracking as data. We're looking at, let's see what's going in so we can make adjustments to that to ensure we are getting the goals that we want for ourselves, or ensure we are optimizing things. So let's just say you are on a fat loss journey. When you're tracking your food, the goal is, let's track things, let's fill the gaps, let's find out where we're going over, and we can now have an accurate gauge of what's going in to adjust things going forward if things stall out. Now, you might be tracking for optimization. As an athlete like myself, I track to ensure that I'm getting enough calories and enough of the right things. You also might track your food as somewhat of accountability. So maybe you are somebody that has dealt with in the past under eating or significant overeating, which is usually triggered from under eating, but we can actually track and keep ourselves in some kind of control by tracking calories, macros, food quality, and be able to realize, okay, I can actually afford to have a little bit of more of this of it. It allows us to budget things better. And that's really what I want you to understand is the tracking is kind of like tracking your money. It's kind of like you're tracking your food the same way you would budget money in your spending. So it's just a really good tool for you guys to understand the purpose of. The other purpose of tracking is that it allows us to actually be aware of the nutritional contents of the foods that we eat on a common basis. And so it makes us more aware of those things so that when we're not tracking, we don't have our tracking app out, we can actually make better choices. So it's really important to understand the purpose of it. Now, when it comes to using food tracking, you can be someone that's looking to track short term, meaning you're like, all right, I really want to focus on fat loss right now. And I'm going to really track my food. I'm going to dial in my macros. I'm going to dial in my food quality. And then the goal is going to be that long term, we move from that intentional eating into intuitive eating. And I've talked about that before. And it also might be for some people a long term solution. So like I said, maybe you are somebody that has struggled with eating in the past, and it's kind of a way to give you some food freedom where you're like, I know that I can eat a little bit more, and I know that where I have to kind of pull things back. And it really just depends on your personality where you're at. I'm a long-term tracker. I don't feel like it restricts my life. I like that, but I'm also optimizing. We're going to go into that. So I'm eating enough calories, so it doesn't make me feel restricted to do that. So what are you tracking, and why are we tracking? So why are we tracking is the most important thing. Is what is the goal? All right, now here's where people can kind of go wrong is if you look at food tracking as a way to consistently and constantly, I should say, restrict your calorie intake. So you are always someone that's like, I'm always trying to be under these numbers. And you never learn how to optimize how much you should be eating to allow yourself to eat more calories. It could end up making you feel like you're constantly almost in food prison. You're always you're always constantly being underfed and only ever focusing on tracking when you're underfeeding, meaning you're only focusing on tracking when you are trying to intentionally lose weight. This can become very, very, very restrictive and also become very overwhelming and stressful. When you are hungry, your body's going to give you signals that you want to eat more calories. And when you're constantly looking at your food budget, and if you are in a fat loss phase for a long period of time, you're going to notice that like the food budget gets smaller because as you lose weight, your body tends to change. This is where optimizing and implementing diet breaks and reverse dieting is very helpful for people. Other people are really good at tracking when they're tracking for fat loss focus, but during that process, they also remove a lot of the foods that they enjoy. And what happens is they get burned out, not from tracking, but they get burned out from eating the same thing over and over again. And they feel guilty for tracking things that they want to be able to eat that they feel like don't fit the plan. So it's actually a misapplication of flexible dieting. They're trying to be too good and they actually feel bad when they're trying to eat things they would eat on a normal basis. They might only track on the weekdays and they get burned out because every single week it's the same thing. They track all week, they don't track on the weekends, and they're not getting any results because they're missing out on what they're not tracking on the weekends. So, a couple of things that tend to cause burnout: guilt around tracking foods that you wouldn't be eating if you were not trying to lose weight, not tracking on the weekends, and then that's causing you to see stalled progress. So, you kind of get burned out. Why am I doing this? And not being flexible with your tracking, not actually allowing yourself to walk out of this like Tupperware life or eating the same thing over and over again. So it's really important that people understand that tracking your food, you should be tracking things that you're going to be eating for the rest of your life, not just tracking things that you're only going to be eating temporarily. And the goal is that you should be optimizing how to get a blend of what I like to call the 80-20 diet, where, the majority of your food is high quality and you're fitting in some of those fun foods. Other things to think about is how long have you been tracking your food and in a fat loss phase and all of those things. If you've been in that phase for a very long time and you haven't taken breaks from tracking, you maybe should. But the goal isn't to take a break from tracking and the food changes drastically, which is why going into the part 2, it's just like you have to be tracking things that you're going to be eating, whether you're tracking or not, is just taking a break from having to feel like you have to be in there might be part of it. But I find that most people that think that they need a break, it's because they are being way too restrictive in what they're eating. Really the truth is you can track a Twinkie or you can track a plate of broccoli. It doesn't change. You're eating something different, but it's what you're tracking that matters. And I think the other thing is like the most important part of this is like the perception of the expectations of tracking. You should be feeling empowered to track your food rather than restricted by it. You should be feeling like by tracking my food, I'm keeping a budget, but it doesn't really change what I have to eat. The restriction comes from the goal. When the goal is to lose weight, we have to restrict calorie intake and cut things back. If that becomes too challenging, learning that you might actually be pushing too hard, you might actually need to be changing your calorie and macronutrient split to get better results, might be the problem. And so when it comes to why we burn out, I want you to understand a couple of things, okay? Number one, food tracking is a tool, okay? It is a tool that you should not need 24/7 long term. When you move out of a fat loss phase and you properly reverse diet yourself, getting enough calories, it should be a very easy for you to intuitively eat pretty much the same calories and macros as you were eating when you were tracking. And maybe you're just pulling it out here and there to ensure that you're optimizing things. Or maybe your weight starts to come back on. You're like, let me pull things out. And you realize maybe you're getting in a little bit too many calories from fats from the foods you've changed up. But the goal is that like it's a tool that you should have. You shouldn't need to use it all the time. Number 2 is that the perception of how you're using something is going to make you feel limited by it or empowered by it. So if you're tracking only with restriction in mind, only with keeping yourself under in mind rather than optimizing, you will burn out. Anybody will burn out. When we work 24/7, we will get tired. So making sure that the way you're using something is actually being applied appropriately and that you should feel empowered, not restricted. And number 3 is the most important thing, is ensuring that if you are tracking and you're doing it with a purpose, that you are, and you're not seeing results, it might be time to make an adjustment to what you're actually trying to do, making sure that you have the right numbers, making sure that you have the right plan in place, because you might be putting in work and effort and not seeing results. And that also might be causing you to burn out a little bit. So Fit Body Short episode today talking is a little bit about food tracking, because food tracking is a great tool. It's an awesome tool. You can learn a ton by it. But if you're finding yourself burning out from it, there might be a couple of things that you're doing wrong. So hopefully this episode was helpful for you all today. I'll see you guys in the next episode.